Next up, we have the Managing Director's Office.
One of our guys isn't here yet. I think we'll start without him. Yep. Let me turn my phone. Should I say David's on his way? Okay.
Just go with him. He'll be here.
Please proceed.
Good afternoon, Council President Clark and members of Council. I'm Mike DeBaradinas, Managing Director, and with me today are Brian Abernathy, First Deputy Managing Director, and soon to arrive David Torres, he'll be here, Administrative Services Director. We expect him momentarily. Also seated behind me are senior members of our leadership team. The total proposed FY19 operating budget for the Managing Director's Office is $101,877,992, with $8,172,464 derived from the Grants Revenue Fund, $138,550 derived from the Water Operating Fund, and $93,566,878 derived from the General Fund. Our General Fund allocation reflects an increase of about $2,400,325 over FY18 estimated obligation levels. This increase is largely intended to create additional capacity within the Police Advisory Commission and the Office of Violence Prevention, support the Office of Criminal Justice as it moves forward with the MacArthur Initiative, funds several additional initiatives to combat the opioid crisis, and funds the creation of a municipal ID program. The increase also reflects several budgetary reorganizations that are described in our written budgetary testimony, including the creation of a new Office of Workforce Development. In fiscal FY19 and beyond, the MDO will continue to place high priority on coordinating activities across operating departments to advance the broader administration initiatives. Specifically, the MDO will continue to advance policy initiatives aimed at enhancing early success, promoting equity and opportunity for our citizens, improving public safety, developing a diverse workforce, and delivering effective and efficient government to the public. I would like to highlight a few of these key initiatives. The Managing Director's Office continues to implement a citywide workforce development strategy known as Fueling Philadelphia's Talent Engine, as well as City as Model Employer Initiative, which aims to create clearer pathways from temporary and seasonal city positions into full-time permanent positions. Thus far in FY18, City as Model Employer has recorded 161 placements into full-time or part-time permanent civil service positions in city government. To enhance coordination among these efforts, Commerce and the MDO has created a new Office of Workforce Development. The MDO will continue to move forward with the out-of-school time strategy that was launched last year. This strategy is designed to improve the quality and access for low-income and at-risk children with out-of-school time experiences. The OST team has launched Philly Reading Coaches, an evidence-based initiative that has proven to help children improve their reading skills and read at grade level at the 4th grade. By the end of calendar year 2018, Philly reading coaches will be in 17 sites, recreation centers, schools, and libraries across the city. MDO also intends to increase its support for violence prevention and criminal justice reform. In FY19, the MDO is committed to continuing building the capacity of the Police Advisory Commission. With the $250,000 in additional proposed funding in FY19, the county administration will have increased the PAC's budget by $658,000, a 165% increase since FY16. Additionally, MDO proposes an additional $300,000 for the Office of Violence Prevention to support community crisis prevention initiatives and community-based anti-violence organizations. We will also continue our focus on criminal justice reform and continue working with our partner agencies and members of council toward achieving an overall 34% reduction in the jail population by the end of FY19. Thanks to the work of the city and our partners through the MacArthur Grant, we are pleased. To this date, we have seen a 28% reduction in the jail population since July 2015. We will also continue our efforts to combat the opioid crisis and help address some of the negative consequences that it is causing in many of our neighborhoods. The proposed FY19 budget includes funding to launch a police-assisted diversion program in the East Division, as well as funding to support neighborhood-based efforts to improve cleanliness and safety in some of the areas hardest hit by the opioid epidemic. In FY19, the Managing Director's Office will be moving forward with the creation of a municipal ID program to provide an alternative to state-issued identification, with the goal of reducing the barriers that many Philadelphians experience when trying to obtain services and benefits. MDO will also continue to support the Rebuild Community Infrastructure Initiative, ensuring that these physical improvements are made with strong community and council engagement. A focus on promoting growth with equity and in making sure that projects are fully inclusive with strong diversity participation levels at all stages, including building a workforce pipeline into the trades. The Managing Director's Office, through the Office of Transportation and Infrastructure Systems, will continue to work closely with the Streets Department and other regional stakeholders to implement the recommendations of the Vision Zero Task Force in order to improve the safety of our transportation network for all users. We will also continue working on the multi-agency transportation strategic plan known as CONNECT, which is focused on advancing opportunity and access, especially to improve mobility for underserved populations alongside equity, health, safety, and sustainability goals. In addition to these exciting strategic initiatives, the Managing Director's Office will continue to advance other vitally important projects aimed at improving the delivery of effective and efficient city services. We will continue to work towards enhancing environmental sustainability through our Zero Waste and Litter Cabinet, continued support for further implementing of the Water Department's Green Cities Clean Water Strategy, and the relaunched GreenWorks Plan. We will continue to target and coordinate human services and other city resources towards addressing the complex challenges of opioid addiction, lead exposure, and behavior in shared public spaces citywide. We will be continuing to review and better coordinate the city's anti-violence strategies, and we will also be continuing to improve accessibility for immigrant populations by leading efforts to maintain Philadelphia as a city that welcomes all, regardless of their immigration status. Perhaps most importantly, the Managing Director's Office will strive to ensure that all operating departments in the city government are providing quality service every day to every neighborhood. We will also strive to make sure that Philadelphia city government is responsive and accessible to everyone and working closely with the residents it serves. Thank you for this opportunity to testify. Members of our senior staff are here with me, and we are happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I got a couple of quick questions. I'll probably come back in the second round. One quick rebuild question, and it relates to the William Penn Foundation rebuild plan, and it required a grant agreement. And I know at one point the administration had asked for an extension. I believe it was due January 13th. Is that been concluded, or?
As far as I know, yes. But I can.
As far as you know?
As far as I know, but I thought I saw Nicole Westerman
Just wanna
here.
get that.
She can confirm that.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I just want to.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Council President Nicole Westerman, Executive Director of Rebuild. So we did have one grant extension already on the William Penn Foundation Startup Grant, and we are actually in the process of requesting a second amendment. Given the delays in the beverage tax litigation, the current request is for an extension until June of 2019.
Okay. So
And we are waiting to have that approved.
Okay. Thank you. Page 4 of your budget details, you show a number of items that are proposed to be decreased in FY19's budget. One of them is kind of near and dear to my heart. Look at a $225,000 reduction to the Philadelphia Energy Authority, which is, kind of like my sweet spot, and a $400,000 reduction to CLS, and a 100 decrease the clip, as I saw Mr. Conway just walk in the room. Can you explain the reductions in funding to those?
From my understanding, those funds were added in caucus last year, and all of the caucus changes were not carried over to FY19.
They were caucus, meaning they were what?
Yes, they were agreed to the.
I thought that's what you meant. So that was some things the council negotiated into the budget, but they were not a carryover.
Correct, they were not
So I
carried
guess
over.
you guys are waiting for us to have to negotiate them again. All right, now I know we always have to put an ass on. I'm surprised you're saying that publicly, to be honest with you. All right. Can you explain this real quick? Page 14 in the details, you talk about a $2.5 million increase in conflict counsel fees. Can you explain to me what that is?
Conflict counsel are attorneys that are private attorneys that have found when there's a conflict in a legal case between, say, a child and a parent or two defendants where the public defender can't defend both parties, they get conflict counsel. And so in the courts have issued a new fee schedule for conflict counsel, and that fee schedule requires us to increase funding for that topic.
So why is it in the managing director's office, I guess is really my question, as opposed to the law department or some other? This
has been in the managing director's office for quite some time. It was actually came over from the courts, I believe, in the Nutter administration at some point.
This was always.
And we have been administering it for 5 or 6 years.
So it's just because it always was.
It's been historic.
All right. Okay.
And to be fair, I'm not sure it would make sense for the law department. It doesn't really fit anywhere, to be fair.
Yeah, that's what I'm kind of wondering where does it go. But I would think law. Okay. So, getting back to the question about the reductions in those three entities. For the record, those were because there were counsel asked, and I'm just want to get you because
I wouldn't say
you're saying that publicly.
No. So what I would the way I would frame that is that in FY18 the mayor proposed a budget, and there were a number of changes both from the administration and council in FY19. Those changes were not carried over into FY19.
All right, and then, was the money spent?
Yes.
Right.
Or is in process of being spent, yes.
And it will be zeroed out probably by the end of the fiscal year.
That's our expectation.
Yeah, so it's likely that we'll need that money for the next fiscal year. I'm just laying the groundwork for our negotiation.
Understood.
Sure.
All right. Okay. All right. Thank you. Chair recognizes Councilman Greenlee.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was actually specifically going to bring up one of those cuts, the CLS issue. I know there was a number of us, Councilwoman Gim, Councilwoman Sanchez, Councilman Green, myself, and others who thought that was very important because that dealt with eviction issues to try to help cut down on eviction. And would you, I guess the question, you know, did you kind of, or did somebody kind of analyze what that money was for, and or was it just that it was assumed to be just because it was ours that it got cut back?
Yeah, and again, I wouldn't necessarily say it was because it was yours. I think I think that as the budget is put together, lots of priorities are shifted. I think from our perspective, that money's been used well and has been successful. And Eva, I don't know if you want to add to that. I think the analysis has been done, and I think you would say that, I would say the work that's been done in the last year has been positive.
That's kind of what we thought too. That's why we were wondering why it got cut. Because as Eva sitting down, it would seem to me that it's saving money elsewhere, like shelters, things like that.
Understood.
If people get evicted, the city's probably going to have to pay that money anyway somewhere. So why not deal with it in the beginning? I'm sorry, Eva.
I'll just share that we think the money is being well spent. It's being used to increase the kind of accessibility of the eviction process.
Right.
So there's a navigator in the court now, and there's an attorney for the day, and there's a hotline that is staffed more fully, and a website, and some additional tenants' rights classes.
Mm-hmm.
It did get started a little bit late because we
Right.
did an RFP process, but we do expect it to be spent out by the end of the year.
To be maxed out. But since it was spent well, would you think it might be a good idea to get it back in there somewhere?
We would appreciate council's support of that, I would say.
Okay. Well, I guess I could be critical and say, why'd you take it out to start with? But I'm not saying you, but whoever decided that, you know, you guys are saying how good it is, but we took it out anyway. It doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. So whoever's listening that decided to take it out, you know, didn't seem to make.
Well, and I would, you know, I think there are, I would expect additional changes as we go forward in this budget process. So.
Oh, no, there's always changes, but it just seemed that, I don't know, I'm repeating myself, I'll leave it go. On a more pleasant note, I guess I should start the annual Tom Conway Appreciation Day, and just mention that CLIP, it continues to be a very positive program, as a lot of the programs you have under there. And one more thing, complimentary, the Office of Special Events. I know we deal with that a lot, with the parkway issues and all like that, and I think the outreach and meetings with the community has been very positive. There are some people you will never satisfy. I think we all know that. But I think given what is out, you know, how you've, and it seems like every year things improve in that area, and but there's always going to be things on the parkway, so, you know, we try to address them. But again, I appreciate the efforts on that.
And there's been an effort with the Parkway Council to examine sort of the various uses and to try to engage the community and figuring out what's the best use of the parkway, and are there other options and venues that we might use.
Right. No, I know you're working on that. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. But we're going to get that $400,000 back, I predict.
You're welcome. So, I'm sorry to jump in. So, on this parkway issue, so every year we say that we're going to review and analyze the usage, but if anything, it continues to be an increase in usage on the parkway for events. I mean, are we really going to get to a point where we make some changes? Because, you know, both the councilman and myself, we have a very special relationship with the people along the parkway.
Yes, there's been I think
so.
Have
we reduced them? Or?
I've been around this a while as well.
I know,
so,
yeah.
I think there's an opportunity here to reconsider the volume of, like, just the sheer number of events.
Yeah, but can we, I mean, are we going to do that? Because
Well,
we've been
yes.
talking about that for a while.
Well, and then also the type. So it's the volume and the nature of the event. So I think And I think in the last couple of years, it has been we believe, I think in the administration, it's been overused and maybe inappropriately used at times, but
Except the
maybe.
parade, which was,
Yeah, of course. But,
that was okay.
So how do we manage all of that, and are there ways that are there different venues that we could use? Can we use other parts of the park? Can we use other parts of the city that people that are traditionally on the parkway and could be effectively used somewhere else? And then also the big events, how do we manage them, and do we sort of always accept the big events? So I think there's two ways of looking at it.
To give you an example,
it'd be
Council
very
President,
helpful. We can just tell at some point when we go to the Philadelphian or Parktown, we can say, we're actually going to reduce something. It would be helpful to us.
Yeah, and as an example, the March for Our Lives this weekend was actually in Old City and through onto Delaware Avenue, as we add a cap to I-95 that actually provides another potential venue for us as well. So I think your point is well taken, and I've certainly spent my share of evenings in the Philadelphian as well.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Councilman Jones.
I like special events, officer.
I know.
I'm just going to tell you that.
They're all right. They're all right.
I wonder why.
Just 'cause I was listening, but I just want you to know, I like them. I want to shift gears to something else that President Clark brought up. And the task force dealing with traffic, parking, and possibly transportation changes, I think is a task force whose time has come, not just in Center City, not just in South Philly. My colleague has to go through an obstacle course to get to his child care needs every day. I've seen him have to do some things. I've seen him have to do some things to get through it. Yeah, we're on the record, I forgot. But in my district in particular, we've been discovered. Manayunk, Roxborough, East Falls is a almost recession-proof place where people want to live, work, and play. We have a number of building permits every day to the point where we almost have to pump our brakes. But some of that is due to lack of access to the other side of the water. We have two existing bridges that are antiquated. We have feeder streets that are too small to service the volume of traffic. And I want to know just generally, not just in my district, but what are plans as we grow? And in light of the fact that we may get 50,000 new workers from Amazon, how are we pre-planning for that kind of prosperity and, quote, success?
Michael Carroll, Deputy Managing Director for the Office of Transportation and Infrastructure Systems. Councilman Jones, you bring up a lot of great points, and you're talking about some pretty impactful issues, and I agree that Manayunk is one of those places. If we're fortunate enough to get Amazon, a lot of people who work for Amazon are going to want to live in the Manayunk miracle. They're going to want to experience that. And so I think ultimately we do have a responsibility to take the type of focus that we've been talking about recently on Center City with the types of transportation issues that manifest themselves in Center City and figure out how to apply that model all around the city, in Manayunk, the Northwest, in general, Northeast, South Philly, no matter where you are, there's a responsibility we have to try and take that comprehensive look at transportation issues and the interaction between different pieces of that puzzle and think about how to address those as constructively as possible. One of the things that makes Center City a good place to start, it's sort of the idea if we can figure it out there, as difficult as those issues are, it gives us a good sense of confidence that we can figure out these issues in other places. But I want to assure you that doesn't mean that everything else stops and we stop looking at the transportation problems that exist in other parts of the city.
So my question, if I could, because the clock is ticking, are we taking a regional approach with Montco, Bucks,
Yes.
and other counties to try to coordinate joint applications for like a bridge.
That's right.
Across the school.
That's exactly right. And
It may not be in our lifetime.
And well,
but
hopefully
we need to plan
so.
for it.
And, the Green Lane Belmont Bridge is an example where for a long time we were pushing for our partners, including PennDOT and Montco, to step up with their fair share. And I'm happy to report that project is coming forward and they are contributing to that project in the same way that they seem happy with the investments that they're able to coordinate with on the trail project. So they see the benefits too on their side, and finally they're stepping up to the plate. So we're encouraged by that.
So we've been besieged by PennDOT from up high telling us how traffic should flow through our city. And we respect the upgrades, and I want to thank you publicly for several times helping my community on Haverford Avenue, and in particular Allegheny Avenue, when they were removing traffic lights, in a sense to be more efficient, but what it was causing is potential kill zones in my district. And we've been able to negotiate that, and I thank you. It comes out of our pocket a little bit, our collective pockets, by way of capital improvements. Each one of those lights that we had to replace was $150,000. But rather than one kid be hit by a vehicle fatally, it's worth the money. But we shouldn't be with the gun to our head from PennDOT, and we need to really get some of Kenyatta's friends up in Harrisburg to do something about that, because it's a 50,000-foot view of planning, but boots on the ground when it comes to walking. And so we have to work that out a little bit.
So, yeah, and I want to thank you for your leadership in trying to bring these issues to the fore. And I want to let you know that because of your work and the work that we're doing collectively, PennDOT is listening. They're paying attention. And like you say, that high-level view, they need to bring that down to the ground, and they realize that now. So we've committed to form a committee with them to revise some of their standards. So if you recall, the situation was they were saying, well, these are the rules. Sorry, guys, we got to take that away from you.
It's incredible.
And we have an opportunity to help them rewrite the rule book. So again, I thank you for your part in that, and I think we will see better results in the future.
So my final thing on transportation, and now I'm going to come back to my friends in violence prevention, but bridges. President Trump has indicated that he wants to do an infrastructure piece. It has long been chronicled by my friend and colleague, Kenyatta Johnson, and others, about the nature, 100-year-old bridges, many of them in a state of disrepair. What is our game plan, working with the state, working with the feds, to, in our lifetime, see some repairs done to that?
Yeah, well, bridges are a big priority for me as well, and for my office, and we're continuing looking for new funding sources, and so there was a lot of excitement when the president was talking about taking this approach. As with many of the statements that come from DC, you kind of have to see whether the actions follow the words, and so we're still in a holding pattern as far as seeing what comes out of DC. The good news is that in the meantime, as one of the knock-on effects from the state transportation bill we call Act 89, there are a couple of new funding sources that have been identified specifically for bridge projects. So you can imagine with the backlog of projects that we've had, we've jumped right into those conversations. We prepared a couple of new grants. Now we have a long list, so I can't promise that in your district those are going to get done soon.
You've already promised 59th Street.
Yeah, 59th Street is very, very much at the top of the projects we're going to be working on. I'm sure Council President's going to ask me about Montgomery, and there's a number of bridges that are on the list. So.
See, I was going to wait until Streets Department came up.
Okay. Well, they've got a good answer for you.
Leave sleeping giants.
So
good advice.
If you would incorporate the Chair of Transportation, Councilman Johnson, in that
Certainly.
dialogue, and also my good colleague, Majority Leader Heenan, from the workload trades kind of impact on being a job creator for the region, that would be helpful.
Okay. I look forward to doing that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognized is Councilman O.
All right, thank you, Council President. Good afternoon. So for the Managing Director, I just really want some clarity on this issue. I'm reading here that it says about the opioid crisis over the last year, the task force, that being the mayor's task force to combat the opioid epidemic, has made progress with both insurance companies, judicial systems. The task force is what?
It's a broad task force of folks representing broad interests across the city, including the government, including my office, that has, and I think Eva can get into the detail, but has put forward a set of programs and actions designed to sort of bring down the number of prescriptions, to make sure that hospitals and doctors are not overprescribing. There's a range of measurable outcomes that the task force is working on, and Eva can give you the detail of them, who's on, like the general sense of who's on the task force,
Right.
and the
So
detail onto their
the
activities.
reason I'm bringing it up is because I was on the task force. The task force hasn't met in over a year. The task force created a report, the report of 18 recommendations. They did not include a recommendation to create, safe injection sites or comprehensive user engagement sites. It was not a recommendation. The recommendation was to further explore, because there was no agreement on the task force. In fact, we had the DEA, High Intensity Drug Unit, and others who were very clearly opposed to safe injection sites. We had some people who felt very strongly, and the rest of us basically said we don't know enough about it to say one way or the other, so we'll just say that the task force recommendation is to further explore. So every time I read in the paper or I see something that says the mayor's task force to combat the opioid epidemic is doing this, is doing that, I'm thinking, gee, it's not the task force I'm familiar with, because we have not done anything after issuing a report.
I agree with you, Councilman. I think it's a misnomer, and I think the media started to pick it up that way, and we've been a little loose with it. So I appreciate what you're saying. The task force officially ended its, completed its responsibilities, as you said, upon completion of the report and presentation of the report last April or May. And you're correct, we had 18 recommendations, and the 13th was to explore whether or not the city would support the development of one or more comprehensive user engagement sites. So since then, that work has been done by city, primarily by city officials with some partners. And in terms of the exploration, we visited both Seattle and Vancouver, and as you probably are already aware, we commissioned a scientific review of the literature to see what the benefits might be. And then what we've been doing is reporting on a quarterly basis through the Mayor's Executive Commission on Drugs and Alcohol in a public manner, and posting that information.
Yeah.
But you are correct, the task force went out of business, and to say the task force is doing this is not technically correct.
Yeah, so I appreciate the work and the continued efforts, whether people agree or disagree. I would like to correct that, because it almost appears to me, as though there isn't a level of confidence by the health commissioner, the commissioner of behavioral health, the mayor's office, to say, we are acting. Because the task force consisted of multidisciplinary people of all different sorts, and people keep going back to the people who served on the task force and saying, why are you guys doing this, or what can you tell us about, what's happening? And we really cannot. I just tell them we haven't met in over a year, we did our job, we did a report, and the rest of it is the administration.
Yeah.
All right.
Again, I appreciate what you said, and I think we'll be very careful to make that distinction going forward.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I would, though, say there's not a lack of confidence in terms of the work that we are doing.
Okay, thank you, thank you. That's all I have, thank you.
Chair recognizes Councilman Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I want to be brief because I only have a limited amount of time. So thank you, Mike, for the work we've been doing with the Special Committee on Gun Violence, as well as Brian and Shondell as well. Just want to go on a record on a couple initiatives that we're working on just to get your feedback as we move through the process. So we've done 2 transfer ordinances, one in the amount of $200,000, another in the amount of $300,000 for violence prevention for this upcoming included budget. And so I just want to get some specifics on what the plans are going to be for those 2 ordinances as relates to violence prevention, and then also during the 5-year plan administration's testimony, the council president asked the Office of Violence Prevention for analysis of the existing programs that started off when the office was created. But it was mentioned that the new number is not 60 million, the new number is 13 million. So I want to have, can you explain specifically why we have the new $13 million number and what it includes? So it's the $500,000, how are we going to utilize it and when? And then 2, this new $13 million number, which was originally 60 million, what that number includes in terms of moving forward.
I can address Shondell Ravel, Executive Director for Office of Violence Prevention. I can address the $60 million from the start. In our initial assessment, it was originally 57 programs citywide, and it was a broad scope. So when we assessed the programs by meeting with each individual program, which was task-consuming, believe me, we determined that a lot of the programs didn't fit our scope. We whittled it down to 31 organizations. The budget was roughly 13 million, actually it was 12,624,775. In our initial assessment, we sent out our evaluation tool invitations to the organizations, and about 30% initially responded. And this was done in August of 2017. The main issue was really trying to bring some validity to our office. A lot of organizations, either by word of mouth or even though they received the initial notice that our offices exist, had some reservations, which we kind of expected. Out of the 31 targeted programs, 21 responded as my January report, and we deemed those as compliant to this point. Of the 21 compliant programs, 19 initially were scheduled for follow-up programs. Mind you, this report, which was done in January, we're further along at this point.
Can you provide myself and the council president and the chairman of public safety, Councilman Curtis Jones, the latest update of this particular report?
Yes, we can. The initial draft was handed in. We're going over it now to make revisions. If council president and yourself could give us a week or 2, we can get you a finalized report.
And just based upon my time, I want to go through a couple other things and give me and also please provide the exact programs that count for the 13 million.
You have exact programs along with contact information, the times that we met with the programs, a complete list of our evaluations at that point.
All right, now let's go talk about this $500,000. I know only 200 can be used. It's either going to be carried over or used during this last budget cycle. And then you got 300 going into the next cycle, which is 2018, 2019. And just for the record, you know, and working in partnership with the administration, you know, I'm always going to advocate that we should have more. You know, I'm always pushing for, let's put a couple million in this area of violence prevention. But I do appreciate that we're starting from somewhere. That's not something that I don't talk about. I will talk about off the record as well as on the record, but I just know we just did a town hall together yesterday, the mayor, Jordan Harris, myself, down in South Philadelphia High School, and obviously we're in a crisis as a city because gun violence continue to go up year after year. The homicides continue to go up year after year, and so I'm looking for more of an aggressive approach as we address this. We have some initiatives in the pipeline that we're looking at. I'm a strong advocate of the program that I'm always calling Mike D about, which is expanding the City as a Model employee program, which you can allow ex-offenders to actually get a pipeline into the city to work similar to the Philadelphia Futures program. But I believe that we need to make this, again, some people have been pitting the opioid crisis versus gun violence. We're just talking about lives, period, at the end of the day. But on this end, it seems like we're not getting that same level of financial resources and support when you talk about, to be quite frank, black and brown children dying in the streets of Philadelphia. I can't say it no other way, but that's just the reality of it. But now, because it's like a mainstream issue, and there's a lot more attention to it, like how we had crack epidemic and people been doing heroin in my neighborhood all their lives, but now it's mainstream. The level of support has been streaming from all different areas. I'm hoping we get to that point when we talk about this issue of youth gun violence. That's why I'm pushing to make sure we get the support for boots on the grounds. We want to evaluate it. We're not just talking about handing out a free check, but we want to make sure that while we're in the streets doing that grassroots outreach to these young men who are carrying these guns, I think that's the only way that's going to turn it around, if we empower the neighborhoods and partner with the neighborhoods. And Mike, you've been around. We've done this under other administrations, full support, full steam ahead, going into these neighborhoods and getting the neighbors involved, so it's not all put on the city. But let's talk about that $500,000 for the record and how we look at using it. If I can have a little bit of latitude, Council President, please.
Just, Councilman, we believe, as you do, that the work of City as Model Employer and the new workforce task force we have, or office we have, can, in some reasonably short order, begin to sort of provide opportunity to work for folks. And I think, as you always say, that's a big part of this. Not everything, but can be a big part of the solution. We want to expand that work. We have some pretty good numbers already, and we want to begin to identify sort of the folks we want, like returning citizens, out-of-school youth. We want to be able to systematically work in neighborhoods with high gun violence or violence rates, and to begin to move folks into the program.
I just want to ask when. Like we got the theories and we got
we're
proposals. Like when we going to rock and roll, put some money on the table and say, look, you know what? We moving forward, full steam ahead. That's just where I'm at.
So I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is this is one tool, and that's prepared to go, and we're prepared to begin to work with council and other sort of nonprofit organizations to begin to offer these opportunities.
Mike, you my man, just tell me when. What's next month? We're going to do this next week. When we going to roll out, because we've been doing a special committee on gun violence, and I did it with the administration, so it won't be an us versus them type of approach. We're going to go into a new summer.
So I'd say I'll come in, Zakiya Ali is here who runs the program. For us, we can be in your office in the next couple of weeks and begin to talk about how do we begin to structure and identify folks to move into this program. So we're ready to do that.
So you're, all right. You said you're prepared to come in our office in 2 weeks to discuss, or you'll be prepared in 2 weeks to start?
Well,
because this is, and I'm sitting here listening to my colleague and my friend, and my frustration has been going on a little longer than his, because it's not a new subject matter, you know. You got to give us a date. You know, we met, Councilman, when did we meet with that group and with Shondell?
It's been about a year now.
A year ago. And we're still talking about, you know, how long? And I don't like to compare one thing with another, but when we realized it was an epidemic in another particular issue that's the subject matter of the day, we immediately launched into a process, establishing sites and all these other things, and it's like, then we, with this, we throw out a false number, $61 million, you got all the advocates coming at us, $61 million, and now it's $13 million, and that's it, it is what it is, and then we're still talking about what?
Well,
come on, man.
all I would say is that we've worked about a year to put together the workforce strategy, which has broader goals, but one of them is clearly to begin to, as city's model employer, to begin to recruit out-of-school youth, 18 to 26-year-olds who maybe never worked or aren't working now, and returning citizens, and have them work to a job, not just work for 6 months and then we see you later. So we're ready to move that out. We're ready to talk about how we can integrate that work into the neighborhoods that need it the most.
And the other thing, and I kind of got to put a little bit back on your clock, I know when your time did the bell ring. Bell didn't ring. All right. But the workforce issue is going to be limited. Let's be real. I mean, we're not going to be hiring that many people over the next several months. Right. And it's a good thing, but we got to have a more comprehensive approach. Like, what was rolled out of the community college, an opportunity for career investment, the whole 9 years. It should be a comprehensive approach. We should have something like at the convention center, right? One of the larger facilities. We said, come down here, let's talk about a comprehensive approach in terms of dealing with this issue, not only on gun violence, but the things we need to do, so that's not even a subject matter anymore. So I'm just saying, let's do big. Let's do big with this issue like we do big with a lot of other stuff. Because now you got all these different people. I mean, you got, Malcolm Jenkins, you got all these different people who are high profile people coming in and want to contribute. You tell some of these people that you're going to have these high profile people at this event, they're going to come, if nothing else, just to see these high profile people. And by the way, while you're here, let's talk about what we need to do to get you on a path towards doing some things that are going to be life-sustaining and family-sustaining. So that's that, and I think that's all I'm trying to say. Let's get serious, let's get big, and let's follow through on our commitment. Councilman, I'm sorry.
We don't disagree.
Good, thank you. Chair recognizes Council. Yeah, Chair recognizes Councilwoman Reynolds Brown.
Oh, okay. All right. I don't know where to start here. I want to start, Councilwoman Sanchez, did you get a chance to put my question on the record? Okay. So, background. Annually, my office visits senior citizen centers around the city from the second Friday in September all the way through up to and including Thanksgiving. We do a tour of senior citizen centers, and we take city representatives who represent various city agencies that are providing services to seniors. We visited the Senior Citizen Center in Councilwoman Sanchez district, and you'd have to help me remember which one it is. It was the recreation center that was taking care of citizens coming from Puerto Rico. Okay? And so it's no secret that when I walk into any place, the first thing I look to see is how well does this room look like the city of Philadelphia? What I saw then that day was that the Office of Emergency Services was providing needed services to those who were coming in from San Francisco. From Puerto Rico, I saw not one Latino person providing services to the very persons who were coming here from Puerto Rico. And so what I'm interested in knowing is, how do we have departments when the mayor has made it a mandate that he wants city departments to look like Philadelphia? And I walk into a room and there's no smell of diversity. How does that happen?
Councilman, you're right. The diversity in the Office of Emergency Management is not where we would like it to be. I think for all of our exempt hires going forward, we are insisting on a diverse pool of candidates, and we're insisting on a diverse interview panel to make sure that we improve those numbers. But I don't have a good answer for you. Is yes, the Office of Emergency Management and some other offices, quite frankly, in the city, are not diverse in the way that we would like them to be. And we are continuously working on that. But it's a fair criticism.
I appreciate your candor and your honesty and straightforwardness about it. And this is no hit at the professionals that were there, because they were completely enjoying what they were doing. The work they do is very, very important, but it is unacceptable in 2018 for us to still have these kind of conversations when the mayor has made it exceedingly clear that this matters. And so to the leadership of those departments, and I really don't know who they are, as I shared with one of your colleagues earlier today, there's some who understand the music and want to dance to the music, and there are others who are tone deaf. And so when you say you're working on it, what does that mean?
I mean, first of all, that office specifically is very small. I believe there are...
Doesn't matter.
I understand. What I'm saying is that as we are hiring new individuals, we will, again, make sure that that candidate pool is diverse and that the interview panel is diverse, and that, again, that we move towards a department and an office that looks more like Philadelphia and is more diverse.
Okay.
But that, I am not going to say that that's going to happen overnight. But
No,
I agree with you
that's
that...
an unfair expectation.
No, but it
because
is
it's a new
absolutely a
mandate.
priority of the Managing Director's office,
Okay,
is to
and so-
continue to diversify our office and all of the offices that report to us.
So the chances are that that particular department missed the opportunity of this new strategy that you've put in place.
I would say that the number of open positions in that office have been few in this administration.
Okay. All right, then.
So, and just to, there's no excuse, and I would say that we're conscious of the question across the MDO's office, and work very closely with Nolan Atkinson and his staff to on a monthly basis measure our progress towards moving towards inclusion and diversity within all the elements of the Managing Director's office. We pay a lot of attention to it. We know we have some distance to go. We think we've made some progress in the last year and a half, and we will continue to pay attention to this important question and continue to make progress.
Agreed, progress has been made. But if
and-
we don't keep our hand on the pulse,
Right.
then you know what, it dies.
Great.
And Councilwoman, there have been 4 vacant positions since the current director has been in place. Those hires have been diverse. We will certainly get you the list
Okay,
of
that's
what
good
that looks
news.
like.
Thank you very much. Okay, if we could go to the table of organization, which captures the fact that the Office of Workforce Development is now part of the mission of the Managing Director's Office. Looking for my chart. And, goodness my. That is a new function, if you will, of the MDO's office, correct? Office of Workforce Development? Is that question? There you
Correct.
go. And so the staff configuration, are they new staff from other parts of government? No, are these staff that are coming from other parts of government, meaning being shifted to this Office of Workforce Development, or are these new professionals that have been hired to outfit that office?
So fundamentally, they are current folks working either in the Managing Director's office or in the Commerce Department and have been deployed to the new office. However, there are a few new hires as well, but fundamentally, it's existing staff.
Okay. Not knowing what the mission is, I want to underscore questions raised by Councilman Dom all the time. Coding is the future. And so I'm curious to know if in the mission statement of that office, what provisions are made to sort of capture those jobs that are of the future, coding being one of them.
Just real quickly to fill in a little bit of this, we have studied with the help of the Pennsylvania Economy League, what are the growth industries over the next 5 years in the city of Philadelphia? Which industries are likely to grow the most?
Yes.
And so we've done that work, and we are now in the process of building relationships with those industries so we can understand their needs and we can match our training and experiences in training we provide to get people ready for those particular jobs. I will ask Sheila Ireland, who's the director of the office, to give you a little more detail.
Okay.
So, Councilwoman Brown, specifically, Sheila Ireland, Executive Director, Office of Workforce Development. Specifically, the first thing we're rolling out of the gate with is our tech partnership.
It's called what?
Tech partnership,
Okay.
right? So it's an industry partnership model. The Economy League report that we are referring to identified 7 sectors across 7 industries, and we decided to focus on tech first. So over the next month, you will see us convening 70 chief information officers across the city of Philadelphia to discuss what that partnership would look like, and specifically to have the partnership drive both the talent development needs of that industry and the work that we do as the city of Philadelphia is convening that partnership. And that partnership includes business, workforce development, and the funding community.
Okay. And I imagine you have processes in place where you will connect with, I forget the name of offices where folks go who need work. What do you
Yeah,
call those
absolutely.
offices?
Yeah, Philadelphia Works.
Yes.
Yes, Career Link and Earn Centers, yeah.
Okay.
They are a key partner in the workforce development strategy.
Well, a lot of kudos are deserved given the focus of that office and what it means for the future for the city. So thank you for the work that you do towards that end. Now moving to thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now moving to the Office of Sustainability, putting my chair of that committee, putting that hat on. I'm curious of 2 things. Is the leadership here for that?
Good afternoon.
2 questions before the clock stops me. What outside grants have you been successful in securing outside of Philadelphia city government to execute and implement the programs of that office? And then secondly, speak to the current capital budget for working with city departments and the future capital projects, and the future status of dollars for new capital projects with city departments.
Could you repeat the first part of the first question?
What grants, if
okay.
any, have you been successful in securing outside of Philadelphia city government?
Sure. Sorry, Christine Knapp, Director of the Office of Sustainability. We've been successful in receiving a lot of grants around the Food Policy Advisory Council, which we house in our office. The manager of FPAC is fully grant funded. Her whole salary is covered by grants from a series of grants. In addition to some of the other work that FPAC does, is all grant funded. We've also recently applied and received a grant from Partners for Places with a match from the Knight Foundation to run an equity pilot focused on high heat in certain neighborhoods that we'll be running this summer.
Very good.
And we've had other grants in the past that are no longer carried forward, but we do always seek out good grant opportunities for us.
Okay.
On your,
The second question,
Yeah.
if you could simply speak to the budget around capital projects currently and what the prospect is going forward.
Sure. So we get about $500,000 a year in capital. That's been traditional for the last several years, and we primarily use that to pass along to other city agencies and departments to fund their capital investments to make sure that energy efficiency and other sustainability considerations are able to be included in those projects.
Sure.
We do that through the programs called the Energy Efficiency and Sustainability Fund. And so we've given out several $1 million to other city departments, and we really try to prioritize projects that have the best return on investment to make sure that's a good use of that capital.
What's been your highlight?
Councilwoman, your
My bell rang.
just trying
I'm
to
on
be,
a roll.
I'm just trying to
Forgive
be fair.
me.
This is the toughest job in this room, is ask the members to limit their time frame. Thank you. Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Keona Sanchez.
Thank you. So I'm going to speak fast. Earlier today, I asked a question about performance-based budgeting. Outside of the mayor's team, both of you gentlemen are considered kind of the top folks in the administration. When we discussed performance-based budgeting and we had the training, what did you envision, and did you see the plans? Again, I've only had a couple plans because we don't have budget binders or other ones, and do you think those are adequate based on what we were looking at performance-based budgeting?
I'm sorry, I'm sorry.
I'm saying, if you had a chance to see them, and it was that what we discussed when we talked about performance-based budgeting?
So, well, I think on the level that I'm most involved in is around out-of-school time, which has real performance. So if we'll know whether we're successful if young children are reading at grade level by the 4th grade.
Yeah, but I'm talking about, again, the mayor's office, my expectation was that the mayor's office would set the tone around goals, right? It is a financial tool. Performance-based budgeting is a financial tool. And in all of the performance-based metrics that I've gotten so far, they're not what we discussed. Where they're not what we discussed is part of our moving away from zero-based budgeting to performance-based, and none of them have a value, financial value, or reinvestment goal. And so, if you've been part of the discussions, I'm open to hear the challenges, but this is not what we talked about.
Councilwoman, the program-based budgeting and the Performance Management Office have been working hand in hand to create new metrics for offices. It has not gotten to the depth or the level that I think we would like to see, but I do think it's the first step. As I think Ms. Adams said, this is a very complex project and it's not going to happen overnight. But I will say that the level and the detail of the metrics, not just the counting, we're not just counting stuff, but we're actually looking at outcomes, has dramatically improved. Has it gotten to the level and detail that you would like to see? Absolutely not. But I think we have taken the first step and created a management tool for us to be able to see what value we're getting for the dollars invested. Again, not to the level of detail that I think you expect, but it is I think a solid start.
I think that, again, I don't want us to say we're doing performance-based budgeting if we're not. If we're trying to create interdepartmental performance goals, that's one thing. That's not program-based budgeting. If you're not measuring, you're not managing. But if it doesn't have a value to savings and reinvestment, then it's not where we want to be. So I just, if we're not ready, we're not ready. But don't say that we're doing it if we're not doing it. Because I think, again, your office, your managing director's office, touches every single department, right? And so when I see some of the things that are laid out here, and again, I like the fact that, you're putting some contract conformance issues, right? You want to get to 53% contract compliance within 90 days. Does that save us money? And why is that important? None of that is not there, right? So I just think that we need to work on that and figure out how we agree on a matrix. But I don't want as much detail and overthinking it. We said we were going to do 16 departments and others, but it should be something that is more accountable than this, right? So, I'm open to the discussion, and we can run it through the appropriations committee if you want. I'm happy to help in any way, but I don't think this is adequate. I wanted to, thank the administration for the allocation on municipal ID. I think it's a good first step, and I look forward to that hearing there. That we'll have and how we move forward and make it happen. Just to give you an example of what I consider a performance-based measurement, I passed Language Access Charter, the charter, and again, this just goes to intent in the spirit of what we're looking at. We've come a long way. Budget, identifying bilingualism. I mean, been here 10 years. I guess it takes a little bit. But when I get a report from a department, and again, I haven't seen all departments because we're getting them a little bit at a time, when a language access plan that was required as of July 1st of last year, when I get something that says we've had a training, we have a coordinator, that's not a plan. That doesn't meet the requirements of the law. The law is the department has a plan. It's not a training. There's a difference, right? Training is we've been trained. A plan is we identify, because then the situation that Councilwoman Blondell Reynolds Brown, and I appreciate that she caught that and she put it in my attention because I sound like a broken record all the time. So it's nice to have somebody join the choir. Then those things pop out at you, right? And so all of this was due last July. And I'd like to see something a little bit more in depth as it relates to the language access piece. Because I don't think it's sufficient, you know? And we're not gonna know if we need additional resources or not if there are no plans.
Yeah. Understood, and Councilwoman, I don't think we would disagree. There have been, to date, there are 37 language access plans that are posted online. 40 annual reports have been received to date. Having said that, I understand that not all of those plans are up to snuff. And I think...
A plan is not, please, and I don't want to get into this, a plan is not a training has been had.
Councilwoman, and I'm agreeing with you. It is not a plan, and I think we are holding our departments accountable to create better and stronger plans going forward. Again, to your point earlier, we have come a long way in 10 years, but we still have a long way to go.
I think we have.
And you have our commitment that we are going to continue to go plow down that road and make those changes.
Okay. And then I want to just circle back around again. I think we've made some progress around some of the organizing around the opioid and some of those issues. I will say that, you know, when we allocate $2.1 million to the effort, and then 1.2 of it is for the Hub of Hope, which was being planned outside of what we were doing for the opioids, I think it sends a message that we're not serious about I mean, this is a crisis. Everybody says it's a crisis. So my expectation was when I saw the $2-point-something million that it was in addition to what we had already committed to Hub of Hope. I don't think $1 million gets us to low barrier respite for the 200 people in my 4 encampments.
Eva Gladstein, Deputy Managing Director, Health and Human Services. I apologize for not saying that before. Councilwoman, there's $2.2 million in low barrier housing, which will be for 80 respite sites, 60 housing first units, and there's an additional $1 million for the operation of Hub of Hope. So the $1 million is not coming out of that.
Okay, so that's not clear there.
Understood.
Okay. All right. My bell has rung. I'll circle back around.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Councilman Green.
Thank you, Council President. Just have some questions. Want to talk about the Fueling Philadelphia's Talent Engine initiative. When did the planning start for that initiative?
I would say a year to a year and a half. So this started with a series of meetings with some of the nonprofits who have been working individually around workforce development and youth summer programs. There was an understanding, at least from the outside folks, that there were lots of individual programs, lots of sort of single good performers, but not a common strategy that people could coalesce around and begin to invest their resources, their funds, and their operations around a strategy that would be coherent and clearly understood. So that's was about a year to a year and a half ago that those conversations started.
So about a year ago, nonprofit organizations reached out, trying to work on this issue, but we don't have a singular strategy, came together with a strategy.
Exactly.
Okay. Vision Zero, about how long did it take for that, when did that initiative, or the planning for that initiative get started?
I will let Deputy Managing Director Mike Carroll respond.
Thank you. You asked the planning of that initiative?
Yes, one of the initial planning that gets started for Vision Zero from the administration.
So the plan's been finalized, so that...
Right, but when did it start?
Oh, okay.
Right.
Just to go through the history, October of 16, we hired the director of the Office of Complete Streets, and she had about 120 days to get the draft plan done.
So 120 days to put together a draft plan?
Yep, we moved from the draft plan to the final plan. I believe it was the June rollout for the final plan.
So would you say about a year to initial planning to final plan?
It's about 6 months more.
6 months?
Yeah.
Okay. And both fueling Philadelphia's talent engine as well as Vision Zero, both were initiatives that were important priorities for the administration.
I would say so, yes.
High priority.
From my perspective, yes.
Okay. So I just want to circle back to the questions that the council president asked, and I caught a tail end of Councilman Jones's questions as well as Councilman Johnson. So I would venture that anti-violence initiatives in the city are also a high priority. And I know there have been nonprofit organizations talking about this issue regarding anti-violence and doing initiatives that do work in the community for at least a year. And there was a press conference announcement about dollars, but we're still just talking about planning. We're not talking about a rollout. We're not talking about a draft plan. We're still talking about planning. So I'm trying to get a perspective, because when I look at violence issues in the city, that's a high priority. I would venture that people at the DAS and the administration would also say it's a high priority, but it seems like we're still working, and I think you made a statement to the council president, we'll see you in a couple weeks to meet in your office about the next planning steps. But if we can put together fueling Philadelphia's talent engine in a year based on nonprofit organizations coming together, when nonprofit organizations are talking about anti-violence initiatives, Vision Zero, we brought in someone, put together a draft plan in 120 days, and it took about 6 months trying to get some perspective on why a year later we're still talking about planning on anti-violence issues when similar nonprofit organizations who are focused on that issue have been asking for resources based on what's been happening in other cities. So I caught the tail end of the conversation, so I don't want to make sure I didn't miss anything, so I'm just trying to get some understanding.
Thank you, Councilman. I think we are ready and prepared to implement a community intervention strategy. And when the funding becomes available, either at the passage of this budget or through ongoing conversations with the appropriations ordinance, we're ready to move forward on that immediately. And we're also ready to move forward on micro grants for community organizations as soon as that funding becomes available.
So ready and prepared to move forward, but there was at one point a dollar amount associated with this initiative, and now that's a lower dollar amount. Am I correct?
I'm not.
So I think there was a high number that was stated. Was it 60 million?
So what?
61 million, and now I'm hearing it's 13 million.
Sure. So,
but before you finish, normally before you make put out a specific number, that number is based on dollars being available, especially when you say something as specific as 61, and now it's been reduced to 13. So I'm still just trying to, maybe I missed something. I know I was out of the room for a little bit. I'm just trying to figure out how, when I asked a question about fueling Philadelphia's talent engine, nonprofit organizations a year ago to put together the plan.
Sure.
Vision Zero hired someone to put together a draft 6 months, which I thought was pretty ambitious, put together a draft in 120 days. Another initiative dealing with anti-violence put out a specific number. Organizations were relying on that number, and now we're hearing a lower number, and I'm trying to figure out the priority perspective.
Sure. So to be clear, the $61 million was money that the city was already spending on what we had perceived at the time was already violence prevention, intervention, or community intervention programs. So that was never new money. And
so that's money that was already being spent on
that is money that is already spent and currently being spent today. And the $13 million, after further review of those programs, when we specifically narrowed down that focus to violence interventions, not community preventions, but violence interventions, we recognized that we were spending $13 million on violence interventions.
Okay.
That's not the way it was reported on the paper.
I guess, Council President, point of information, because I was...
No, I don't remember it. When it was, when the story was written, it was clearly referencing, because we had just had the press conference, right? We talked about this initiative, the whole 9 yards, and I don't recall it being specifically limited to what you're now saying is the 13 million. So now you're saying the 61 was what exactly?
And 61 was a bigger pot of programs.
To do what? Because we were talking about violence prevention.
Correct. And so a lot of those programs have something to do with violence. And so it could be an education program in a recreation center, but it's not a direct intervention to prevent violence. But it does.
What's the difference?
And I think that is the challenge.
If you're working in a recreation program with young people, running a league or whatever, to keep them from getting engaged in violence-related activity, I don't understand what's the difference between direct, as you say, direct violence intervention.
Right, and I think part of the conversation, and I think we should continue to have this conversation because it's important.
I'm going to be here for the next 2 months.
Fair enough.
Continue to have it.
Fair enough.
It's mandated by charter. We got to do these budget hearings, so we'll be here.
You know, I think as we're trying to look at the universe of violence intervention, understanding exactly what we're talking about is really important. And I think if we try to boil the ocean and include every program that may or may not touch violence, that does certainly include workforce development. It certainly includes out-of-school time. It certainly includes mentorship programs. If we try to wrap our hands around all of that, I think we will very quickly get lost. And I think that's what the last administration, as they tried to move forward on their anti-violence initiatives, they got lost in all of that.
I don't remember them moving forward on anything relating to that.
Fair enough.
I remember them undoing the things that John Street had put in place as the mayor.
I know
as it relates to violence intervention and early intervention, and they spent their time unraveling all of those programs.
They made some efforts, but put that aside. I think what we're trying to do is really take a look at those specific programs that have a direct tie to violence that's happening now in our community. And so that would be things like PAN. That would be things like a lot of those grassroots organizations that you brought in, and how do we support those going forward and the impact that they're having in their communities. It's about trying to figure out how to interrupt the violence and how to provide alternatives.
Yeah, but we don't want you to limit. I mean, whatever program you use, which is the 61, right? That can lead towards the reduction in violence. I don't care what, education, I mean, all that. So we want you to make sure that, because there are a lot of programs, and I'm still not clear what the difference is, that they should have the same level of scrutiny in terms of, as you say, performance-based, since we've been talking about that. You know, just because we can't say, well, the guys that are out doing the street intervention, Schulers and, you know, those are the Bilaus, that you're going to have a level of scrutiny that you have to show that you're producing, right? And let the people who are doing the other 50, 40 something million, then you're not going to reach that level of scrutiny, because I'm not sure that a lot of those programs that are being funded are producing the level of performance-based budgeting as these other individuals are. So if you're going to do it for everybody.
Yeah. And some of these programs are already going through some of those processes. So I'll use the example of DHS-funded programs already go through a performance management process to make sure that they're looking
So they're reducing violence?
The metrics are not always about reducing violence, and I think that's a conversation I'd like to continue to have.
That's what you just said there? Maybe we don't understand what.
I think we're talking past each other some, but.
I'm saying, all right. I actually think, and honestly, I think that the perspective of some people's approach to dealing with violence is different than others. Like, there are people who may represent certain areas or certain communities who may involve at a different level with violence to have a different perspective than those that haven't. I'm just being honest with you, which is why we convene that meeting to talk to people who are out there every day. And there were people across the board in that meeting, Councilman. There were people that did different things. Everybody wasn't on the corner. And I mean, you were in the meeting. You know, it was like 20, 30 people. Yep. Everybody in that room was not the people that were standing on the corner doing direct intervention with guys that were getting ready to go shoot somebody. You know, it was all different kinds of groups. So I think maybe we need to understand what we're trying to achieve first, and the level and the scope of what we're trying to achieve, and then we can talk about, because if there's 61 million that has some relationship to anti-violence or violence prevention or direct intervention, whatever you call it, then that's what needs to be analyzed, the entire 61. That's just my perspective.
Fair enough.
All right. Councilman? Yeah.
Information, and it's all relevant. And the 500,000 that was transferred on the same topic about violence and violence prevention on the ground, that's going to be utilized how?
So we're talking about two different pots of money. One is the 200,000 that council recently appropriated. Should that become available, we would use that to begin standing up the crisis intervention teams.
Can you go back when you say should that be available? Why wouldn't it be available? So when you say should, or when it be available? When it becomes available?
Certainly when it becomes available, it would be used for community crisis intervention teams. It would be used for a staff person to increase data analytics, and it would provide micro grants for those community organizations that the council president had already referenced. That 300,000 is also similarly anticipated to be spent, with the majority going to crisis intervention teams, as well as and then the remainder being used for micro grants.
And how soon do we expect to see an actual budget broken down, saying here's how the money is going to be divided going into the summer of 2018?
We can provide you that budget.
Thank you. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Green, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to go back and forth in reference to the dollars. I mean, there's obviously some miscommunication from that perspective, but I'm going to just focus on the actual plan itself. And it seems like, and I'm correct if I'm wrong, there will be a future meeting to discuss a future plan, whereas those two other initiatives which I've referenced to, they were able to come together with a plan going forward in a 6 months or a year timeline. So what is the perspective in having an anti-violence strategy and or plan, especially even though, you know, violence from a macro level has gone down across the nation, the Commonwealth, and the city, murders have gone up. So to me, that would be an issue of importance, just like the opioid crisis and some other initiatives, like the initiatives I just referenced to. So I'm trying to get a perspective how we're able to get a plan in those two other initiatives within 6 months to a year, but we're still waiting to possibly put together a plan for anti-violence.
I think we have a plan on how to move forward and spend money at this point. I think what the managing director was referencing was a plan to tie in workforce into that.
Okay, so from the managing director's perspective, we have a plan for anti-violence.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question again? I'm
So from the managing director's perspective, we have a plan for anti-violence.
We have a part of, let me just talk about the workforce that I talked about earlier, and that...
No, not so much
No?
the workforce, just is that part, so you're saying the workforce piece is part of anti-violence plan, or is that a workforce plan? Because the workforce plan is, to me, that's a fueling field office talent engine. I'm talking about anti-violence, just anti-violence.
Right. So to the extent that to the extent that the workforce program has a target for out-of-school youth, 18 to 26-year-olds,
right. Mm-hmm.
Has that as a target audience, and we want to begin to work to move those folks into the program. That will have, if it works, then it'll hopefully have an impact on, over time, will have an impact on violence.
Okay, that's a piece of an anti-violence initiative. Are you saying that is the anti-violence initiative?
No, it's just, it is a potential impact. It also wants to provide folks with work and decent paying jobs and the skills necessary
It's
to
interrelated.
compete.
So it's connected to and or possibly a piece of, but do we have an overall anti-violence strategy or plan?
I think that's...
that's, to me, it seems like it's yes, we do, or no, we don't. It's not, I'm not a rocket scientist.
I would say that we do not have a broad-based overarching violence prevention strategy.
Okay,
We aspire to that. We've made great
Okay.
progress to that, but we're not there yet.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
all I asked. I just was comparing that from the beginning part of my question. Not sure how much time I have left, because I'm also not really a good timekeeper.
None.
Even though people jumped
I
into my
know,
time, so.
I know, but we're up to like 17.
Oh, yeah, it was point of information from leadership, colleagues. I was just deferring. But I'm going back to my original point. That's why I asked a question about the timeline of putting together the Talent Engine Initiative, which nonprofit-based, about a year. Vision Zero, also non-nonprofits involved in the issue, 6 months. And we've had an increase in murders, but we still don't have an overall violence plan. But we have things that help address that to some degree, which is out of time and workforce initiatives, but we don't have an overarching plan, although there have been similar type of organizations from a nonprofit perspective, just like from the workforce perspective, you said didn't have an overall strategy, asking for a strategy on an anti-violence plan. So my understanding is we do not have that as of right now, and there'll be a future meeting with the council president and others to address it. Because, people reach out to me, and been reaching out to me saying, well, where's the money? What's the initiative? What's going on? Thinking that this $61 million is new money. Now my understanding this is what we already spend on anti-violence initiatives, and the $13 million is also violence intervention that we already spend, but not new. So it's definitely not new dollars.
Right.
So that if there is going to be new dollars outside of the money that Councilman Johnson talked about, that's something that have to come through this body because it's not been identified or appropriated. Yes or no?
Yeah.
Yes or no?
I missed the last part.
I'm trying not to make this like a courtroom, but
Yes.
take me back to my DA days.
So the 300,000 does appropriate additional anti-violence dollars, but there has not been a larger appropriation at this time.
Okay. Since they're talking, I'll ask some other questions. Mr. Carroll, you're here. You talked about infrastructure, and Councilman Jones asked you some questions, and you made reference to the Transportation Bill, Bill 98, and that was also part of a P3 initiative. We talked about that yesterday, and the Rapid Bridge Replacement Project. And from my recollection, in talking to some people who are on the state P3 board, I wasn't aware of any dollars being available for the city of Philadelphia, and that it was other counties around the Commonwealth that were able to access those dollars. And I think I raised this question last year. My understanding we were not eligible for any of those dollars. Is that correct? Yes or no?
So the dollars I'm talking about are different.
Right, it was different. So
Okay.
I just want to be clear, because I remember when we talked about this last year,
Yeah.
you said that we were not eligible for those dollars, but you're
Right.
talking about a different pot of dollars that the city may be eligible for that's not part of the transportation fund that was used for the Rapid Bridge Replacement Project.
So I have no information that's changed.
I just want to confirm from a perspective from last year. Okay. And then,
Councilman,
what? You were talking to Mr. Stitt.
Councilman, we are,
You're having a conversation
we're
about
on
financial
20,
matters.
Councilman, we're on 20 minutes. We haven't
Well, I was
been in-
interrupted
We haven't been
by
in the room
3
for
members
20.
of this body, almost a committee hearing.
Yeah, we'll come right back to you, sir.
Okay.
No,
I guess my time has finally expired.
we'll give you extra time. Thanks, Councilman. I had one real quick question, then we're going to start the second round. Councilman Johnson, and my favorite subject as it relates to animals, raccoons. I have a little lighter subject. So we wrote Councilman Johnson and myself, we wrote a letter to the managing director about raccoons. We had done some research in terms of the history and the whole line. I know the councilman had a hearing.
Yes, sir.
And at the end of the day, we got a response finally yesterday, day before the managing director's testimony, but I'm going to say that was a coincidence. But at the end of the day, when we contacted the state, because we were always led to believe that it's state responsibility, State Gaming Commission, and we reached out to the State Gaming Commission, and they told us that, one, we, the city, had the authority to deal with raccoons, and we let that authority expire. And the state basically said, well, if you're interested in having the authority to be responsible for dealing with this raccoon problem, you just simply need to send a letter and ask, and we'll probably give it right back to you. Now, knowing the response, it was like 2 sentences. Yeah, we got your letter. We're looking at it. So now that we're in a budget hearing, and it was actually a memo from Ms. Cruz. Good afternoon. Got your letter, blah, blah, blah. We review, and we'll let you know. So now, when you get in the budget hearing, it tends to be a little more exhaustive conversation. So, are you the one responsible for this issue?
Yes, sir. My name is Vincent Medley. I'm the Executive Director of the Animal Care and Control Team of Philadelphia.
Okay. So, what exactly is going to happen?
With regards to the raccoons,
I thought that was a pretty good lead-in.
So, to take a look at why the permit lapsed or the permission lapsed, the City of Philadelphia has been through several iterations of how to deal with animal control. This most recent one that was created, Act Philly, was created in principle to deal with the mass euthanasia of domestic dogs and cats. And so as part of how the organization was constructed, as well as the positions and the personnel and the contract, our two missions are to protect the public health and safety for animals that are an immediate threat to the public, which we do address. That's how we address raccoons. But then principally to save the lives of the volumes of dogs and cats that come into the shelter. That also as well pose a danger to the public because we investigate and quarantine animals that may be suspected of rabies when it comes to bite cases, and then also ones where people call in to say that a dog or a dog has attacked them or a dog is chasing them in the public.
Okay, so you give me a history of the dogs and cats and the mission of the original formation. I'm asking you about raccoons.
Council President, if I may. We will figure out how to deal with raccoons, either through animal control or the health department vector. I don't have an answer for you on which department will handle it, but we will handle it. And that is why you had we are discussing.
Okay, so if the first thing, which per the State Gaming Commission, could be requesting reinsertion of our authority to do whatever we ultimately end up as the best practice. That would be something that we can do.
We will do that.
We will do.
We will do that.
Okay.
President Clark, if I may, Joanna Otero Cruz, Deputy Managing Director of Community Services. We are scheduled to meet with the Health Department Director on Thursday to discuss how we can remedy this issue and get back to your office. I spoke to someone in your office earlier this week, and so we will get back to you the week of the 9th as committed.
Okay, but until we get the authorization of the state to reinsert the authority that we need to get state authorization from, there's really not much we can do, is my understanding. So I'll accept Mr. Abernathy's commitment to start that process, and then I guess concurrent to that, you all can determine once we get the authority, then we can hopefully deal with this issue.
Understood.
I appreciate you. Thank you, sir. I'm good. Chair recognizes Councilman Don.
Thank you. Thank you, Council President. Good afternoon. I have 4 quick questions, hopefully. CLIP, by the way, is doing a great job from what I can see. I will just commend their work, especially Tommy Conway. And so my question, I wasn't here. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay. But here's my question. When's the last time CLIP increased the fines for property owners? Because they're receiving violations, because we're looking for revenue sources, and that might be one.
Thomas Conway, Deputy Managing Director. We're looking to, actually L&I would be the department that would increase the not so much the fines, but the cost for the bags, for the employees, for the vehicles, and one more.
Do you know the last time that was raised?
I believe it might have been like 6 years ago. But L&I is working on that. Commissioner Perry is doing that to upgrade the amount of
Okay.
money it costs to do an abatement.
And to be clear, we've reviewed all of our fines and permits and looking to see how we can use those as alternate forms of revenue.
Okay. All right, thank you. Another question, second question is, in 2013, the MDO office had 171 employees. In the budget that we're looking at today, we're looking at doubling that figure to 348. That's over a 5 or 6 year period. Any reason why it would have doubled like that?
In 2013, the Nutter administration essentially had created a managing director's office that is, in today's administration, the chief administrative office. The only thing the managing director's office oversaw in the Nutter administration was our internal operating departments. The managing director's office today has a much broader breadth and incorporates a lot of what the deputy mayor offices had in the Nutter administration.
And so from 17 to 18, though, the positions in 17 were like 325, they're going up to 348. Any reason why we have that kind of an increase?
I will certainly look at the specifics of why that increases, but we've also restructured our office considerably in this fiscal year.
Chris Roop, Chief of Staff, Managing Director's Office. I was just going to echo Brian's comment. Some of the position count change from FY17 to FY18 has been due to some restructurings.
And we also heard earlier, though, that the mayor's office took in some people from the managing director's office into their budget. So when you calculate that loss, it's even a greater increase in total numbers, because their salaries went up like 19% from what I recall this morning. And so I'm just curious as to why we're seeing such a big increase.
So going from, you're speaking about FY19, that was what was discussed earlier today. Right. While we are moving some positions from the managing director's office to the mayor's office, we are also bringing in some positions that presently reside in other departments due to the creation of the Office of Workforce Development. There's also several positions that were added to our books that are related to the MacArthur Initiative for positions that presently work in the 1st Judicial District and in other agencies who are already on the payroll but need to be accurately reflected on our books. So that drives some of the number as well.
Can you do me a favor? You don't have to do it today. Just send us when you have a chance the increase in staff and what it's attributed to. That's what we'd like to receive. Send it to us.
Sure, happy to provide that.
Here's my next question. And this may not be your department. I'm just curious to know if we know the number of vacant lots and vacant properties that currently exist in Philadelphia that we have control of.
I believe we've been quoting the number 40,000. But again, I'm happy to provide that, get that from L&I. And
40,000?
40,000, and from Planning and Development.
Yeah. And that's not owned by the city, though.
No, that 40,000 is all vacant property,
and
privately and publicly.
Right. Can we find out the number that's owned by the city?
I believe it's approximately 10,000. Approximately 10,000.
Maybe we just get that and break it down between vacant lot and properties. The last question I have is regarding criminal justice and prison reform. You know how to ask this question.
I was waiting for you to ask this question, Council.
Okay. So I know we spoke or we met back in August, and you graciously agreed to do that RFP, hire an outside consultant to evaluate operations and see what's going on. I was just wondering what the status of that RFP was.
Julie Wertheimer, Chief of Staff, Criminal Justice Managing Director's Office. There is one RFP on the space study that has been awarded but is still in the contract conformance phase, and there is one RFP on cost analysis that is about to be awarded, but the award has not been made official yet. We expect that to be pretty imminent, and the prisons will be able to speak to that as well.
Do you have any idea when the results of those may come in for us, so we can see how that blends in with our budgeting process?
We can get you that information. The exact timeline is outlined in the contract scope.
Yeah. And I think our hope, similar to yours, is that it can align with the budgeting process next fiscal year. That's our hope.
And I just came across some figures today I was not aware of. In 2008 rather, there were 9,400 prisoners. A few years ago there was 8,200, and today is our number like 6 to 6,100?
5622.
Yes.
5622.
Yes.
Phenomenal. Congratulations. That's amazing. That's great.
Thank you.
That is amazing. That is amazing. That is great. Anyway, So my next question, you know what's going to be? Well, we have to figure this out because there's got to be money that we can save there. But I think that, by the way, that is the best news I've heard.
So,
5622, that's great.
Councilman, I think to answer part of your question, I think the one thing that has been a figure that's been floated out there, but we need to explicitly state more, is that while we've seen a 30% decrease in the jail population in less than 3 years, at the same time, the approximate capacity of State Road is somewhere around 6,700, depending on how you count certain things like the medical wing and things like that. So while we've seen a 30% decrease, about 18% of the original decrease only got us down to the actual capacity of what State Road was designed to hold. So when we're looking for savings in terms of facilities, it's only in the past few months that we've really stayed below capacity. And I know that Commissioner Carney and her team are working hard to see how we can better allocate space to realize those savings, but I don't think the large long-term savings that would come from closing a facility will happen imminently or in the next fiscal year. We're hopeful and trying to be aggressive in reaching that, but at the same time, this budget doesn't reflect it because we have to wait and see. Last year, we saw a 6-month plateau in the jail population, starting in about March or April. And so if we see the same thing again, we won't continue to see the same downward trend that we've been experiencing for the past few months.
So one comment to that, and thank you. When I met with the commissioner and people from the prison department, they told me the high was 8,200. They told me they were reducing 2,400. They told me 500 of the 2,400 were in triple cells, and the rest were in double cells, which is normal. So I'm not sure how that capacity number changed, because at 8,200, if you take out the 5, the capacity really is 7,700. This is from a meeting, I know the facts exactly how that occurred, so I'm questioning those numbers as to what's really capacity.
We can go back and do the exact breakdown. They might have been accounting for things like the outside housing contracts, which we've been reducing.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Well, I think the overall goal, though, is think about this. If we've come down from 9,000 to where we are now, there's got to be, on a $270 million prison budget, with fringe benefits at $370 million, even if we can save 15%, that's $250 million over 5 years of the 660 we now need. So that's why I think this is a big area of saving money. I'm over my time, but thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman. I don't mind your time. I was just interested in the conversation. If I could, Joy, do you mind coming back up while I have you? And I will not get into a conversation with Councilman Jones over the space of our correctional facilities. But you said that there is a RFP out for a design for space? Or are we internally looking at that for the correctional facilities?
The RFP is not for a design, it's for a spatial analysis to better understand and utilize our space that we currently have existing.
At the current levels?
At the current level.
You know, a variable of 4 or 5%?
Correct. Right. They're going to be looking at the trends and I think to some extent projections of both their own and projections that we'll be getting from our work with the criminal justice partners outside of the study.
The partners that are put together through the MacArthur grant?
Yes.
And how is that going? How are the deliverables? Are they in the process of implementation?
So as of today, a moment in time, we are at 30.4% decrease from our benchmark in July 2015. The grant was intended to be 34%, and that's another year from now. So I'd say in terms of just the percentage decline, we're doing pretty well. There are larger scale changes that we're still looking to do in terms of significantly reducing our reliance on cash bail as a system, working on some probation initiatives and working with those who are seriously mentally ill in the jails that we've started to roll out or are in the planning phases of, but have yet to realize. I think to date we've started 16 of the 19 initiatives funded by the grant, but some of them are in early stages and 3 have not started yet.
And we have a new district attorney who is
who's been very helpful.
Very supportive of some of the criminal justice reform that is going to be put in place as a result of the MacArthur grant. How does the space and the master plan that the correctional facility had in previous few years ago differ? Right, so there was a master plan over the facilities, I guess, proper, and spatial design and spatial plan that you're going over now. Is there a difference in that? Or can we use some of that baseline that's already, that we have?
Yeah, so I think the existing master plan will inform as the baseline what the new RFP will look at, and we should note that the RFP for the space study technically lives with the Department of Public Property, although it's working closely with the MDO and obviously with the Department of Prisons. I think that will be the basis, but then there's also a slightly different focus guided by Commissioner Carney in terms of not just what does the physical footprint look like, but how we use the space, how we reappropriate existing spaces maybe for more service delivery.
Look at, I spent, the entire budget season last year asking every department, about their spatial design. How many employees do we own? Do we rent? What floor space do we have? Are they field employees? Are they, so I think spatial design or, your space, space design is extremely important and efficient. And especially when you're dealing with a population that may fluctuate back and forth, and you got to, kind of, make a decision, tough decisions on energy costs, population costs, infrastructure costs, and so forth. All right. So, not what I had planned on asking my line of questionings, but I would certainly follow up with you in my office to see if I can, see where get caught up to speed on. The MacArthur implementations, where we're headed. I think energy is a huge cost, I think, with the facilities up there on the state road. I'd love to have that kind of conversation offline and where we're headed with that and the savings that we can, put back into the city. And I know our managing director has had some ideas and some, I guess, some successes with Parks and Recs. With some energy costs, but I would love to have that conversation offline. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to give a shout out to Tommy Conway. All right. I'm not going to ask him to come up because I told him I would not, although I want to, because my question I see a decrease in the budget for CLIP, which is a little bit disheartening in my expectations for Northeast Philadelphia and the city. But I wanted to ask a question about how the vacant property compliance improved 6-7%. Are there some changes in technology with owners, or is it additional resources that were available last year that might not be available this year, but there certainly is something's measured because you can see an increase in compliance?
Well, Thomas Conway, Deputy Managing Director, it's pretty much a crapshoot with regards to the compliance rate.
Okay, you can sit back there. Never mind. No, I'm a joke. Come on, get back here.
Actually, in the wintertime months, when we do the inspection, we allow the compliance period and then do a re-inspection. The compliance period, compliance rate actually would go down. In the warmer months and the summer months, when we're a lot busier, compliance rate will actually decrease more or increase.
So is that if we took an average over last 5 years, would that show seasonal fluctuation in compliance?
If you do it, yeah, seasonal, absolutely. It usually hovers around 25 to 30% since pretty much the inception about 15 years ago for the compliance rate.
Yeah, right.
And again, a lot of the property owners, their address is actually the vacant lot's address. So there is actually no owner. So we're not getting compliance with that.
And we started a new program with doors and windows when it comes to
Yeah, the doors and windows, yeah,
visibility.
that's, well, basically the vacant properties that are boarded up throughout the city. We started this with the Fairhill, Kensington area, Gurney Street, where we just painted the boards to make it look like doors and windows. And actually, it makes a tremendous difference if you're just walking down a block or something like that. You really can't tell. We did one on 4800 Cottage Street too. I think it's in Frankfurt, where it was a city property. We did all the doors and windows on that, and you really can't tell the difference. It's pretty amazing.
No, it is. I mean, yeah, the councilwoman, it's her district, I'm sure. Well, what's
How
that?
much each one of them cost? The fact that they get broken into less? So we should be doing them more, right?
You can
Right.
answer that.
I mean, basically, we don't, the board's already up on the property, and we just paint on top of the boards there. We don't install them and all that, and just anti-graffiti actually does it. It paints the boards.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you for your time. I'm not going to touch on the city as a model employer because I think we discussed that earlier. I'll get caught offline on that. And how are we with performance management?
I think as we testified, as everyone's testified earlier, it's a work in progress. We're committed to getting better over time, but I think we've made some progress. But we know we need to spend more time and more energy to up our game.
Okay. And lastly, and I'll yield because I was out of the room for a briefing. 311. I see Tim over there. I know he's been expecting some questions. Just, how have we improved in the response in emails that are coming back routinely, automatically? I think your technology is amazing. I think what you do and what we're trying to do as a city with 311 is incredible. We've had some experience where some of the violations have incorrectly been routed automatically unfounded. And, they may be just old or information or glitches. But in our customer service approach, what are your expectations for those glitches to be worked out or, responses, for our customers, which are our constituents?
Thank you, Councilman. My name is Tim Thornton. I'm the director of Philly 311. The system itself has been in since 2008. And when I came in from the private sector. I came in from Vanguard, and I'd worked there for 32 years, so I got a chance to implement some of the techniques we did at Vanguard.
Yep.
And what that did was allow us to find out the problems that many of you know, where tickets are closed and the work's not done, answers are given incorrectly, et cetera. So we actually have 3,400 comments from citizens, and we have put them up on the wall, and we know what those issues are. And the issues tend to be primarily technology and then process issues. And I've had a chance to work with the Streets Department Commissioner on a monthly basis, Commissioner Perry on a monthly basis, and we're sort of picking these things off. The easy ones are just simple little technology fixes and training. Some of them more fundamental problems that are going to take a bigger investment. So that's sort of our story. If you look at it, we've improved a little bit.
I know you improved, and I'm a fan of you and your approach to 311 and fixing these changes. I've actually worked with you as an operator, all right, so I could understand 311 and take some calls, which I think are I think is important. I think we all, as policymakers, should understand how the government works, you know, in real time. Is there a capital request for technology for 311?
There isn't right this moment. It will be coming, you know, we have a little more thinking to do this year. The technology that we have, we've started to go to L&I and revenue and other departments and show them how great the city's investment was. The city spent $6.5 million on this technology called Salesforce, and it was really focused just in 311. And what we've tried to do is, like you did, we're trying to introduce it in all the council offices and some of our major partners. So we're trying to extend that investment. So we're still thinking through that, but I think it'll be next year where we'll see a bit of a request.
Okay. Chair recognizes Councilman Jones.
I'm gonna let you live. I'm not gonna get you.
Tim, run.
My staff prides itself on responses to raccoons, potholes. You got a lot of work to do. I work directly with department heads, thank you. I shouldn't. I should go through that and put the timer on it. But if we did, all of us would be in trouble. Be honest with you. Response time is slow. We get it done twice by the time we get a ticket. So we need to work on that. But my question in time isn't on that. I need to talk about Town Watch and others, if I could get them to come up. I'm gonna let them live. Thank you. A lot of time and effort has been dedicated during this budget process to talk about violence prevention. I'll introduce to some and reacquaint to others one of the original violence prevention agencies, entities in the city of Philadelphia. When was Town Watch established?
When was Town Watch established? Good afternoon.
Say your name.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon. My name is Anthony Murphy. I'm the Executive Director of Town Watch Integrated Services. Town Watch was established in the city of Philadelphia currently in 1996.
So for over 12 years you've been in that capacity. There was less coordination going on before that, but even before that, there was a Town Watch.
Yes, there was Town Watch earlier that was not coordinated through the city, and Mayor Rendell at the time wanted to establish a Town Watch program that was coordinated so that training was provided to citizens across the city that would be the same, and equipment could be issued to them in the same way, and then they had a resource that they could refer back to whenever they needed assistance.
So Town Watch is different things to different neighborhoods. In East Falls, I have a different Town Watch than I do in Winfield or other parts of West Philly. Is that correct?
Yes, Town Watch is more or less suited to the communities that they're in and along with the neighbors and how they want to develop it based on the issues that they face.
So in a lot of senses, you're the eyes and ears of police department on varying types of crime and even violence.
Well, yes, sir. That's our motto, is that we are eyes and ears.
How much do you coordinate with other agencies? And I know I don't want to get you in trouble. Your boss is next to you. I realize that. But are you, but you know me. So the essential part of working with police and local police you do, correct?
Yes, we work with the city departments as well, because when we're doing neighborhood activities that require cleanups, we work with CLIP, we work with streets, because it's necessary to make sure that there are resources that are provided to the citizens that are doing the work. So yes, we
So the reason why cleanups are important is because a vacant lot quickly becomes a crime scene if you do not clean it up. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So you see the potential area, then take initiatives not just to be the eyes and ears, but to actually remove the impediment in the neighborhood. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
What was your budget when you first started?
It was $850,000.
What is your budget proposed this time?
Well, my budget now is a part of the managing director's office, and
how much is your budget?
I don't know.
All right, how much is the budget?
$659,000.
So it's down in today's times from back when?
96.
All right. Just as an example, in the 4th District, your staff at 7 a.m. every Monday morning, God gives when the schools are open, joins a collective phone call that deals with youth violence in my district with about 8 principals. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And we coordinate with the police in the 19th District. We coordinate with the camera patrols that give safe corridor passage to those young people when they get, as a result of Bernard Scott's death. You guys have been working with us every Monday to prevent violence, and knock on wood in my head, there has not been another killing at Overbrook since then. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, so, now I know that wasn't the Bobby Heenan clock, but that's all right. What I want to say is you have all of the tools on your tool belt. You got to get them to work together to build what is necessary. And this is one that I vouch for completely, whether we do the kickoff at Rose Playground, where some of our town watches walk up and down Haverford Avenue, and in those middle neighborhoods that Parker talks about, you can tell you got a good neighborhood when you have a town watch. If people are running and hiding, as opposed to confronting the element of crime in their neighborhood, you have a problem. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention, and I'm going to, during the part of the budget, ask individual departments how you integrate with them. And I want you to know that we care about them. And you've trained our people in that all of the principals that were worried about youth violence, and we found out through you that the incidents were at one particular bus stop. And the bus stop, the reason why it was such a problem was because that's where the favorite pizza place was. And we put a camera there, we put people there, and it curbed that violence. We were able to work with principals to change the dismissal time by 5 minutes so that kids missed each other. I mean, simple things like that. I just want to say, on the record, we are thankful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilman Johnson.
That's what's up. I want to give a shout out to Tom Conway as well. I don't understand how we keep cutting their budget, but I guess that's up for the administration to determine. But I want my own clip in the 2nd Councilmanic District, to be quite frank with you. I mean, I know Ms. Krajewski, it's been a while since she's served in this body. I think she's done some great work. I know that program is the primary focus in the northeast part of Philadelphia, but I do think the CLIP program, when I do call Tom Conway to address those quality of life issues in South Philadelphia, Southwest Philadelphia, and even Center City, he steps up to the plate and sends a team down there to immediately address it. So didn't want to say that for the record, so hopefully we can restore their budget or even increase it to move forward. I just have 2 questions I want to focus on just real quick. Under leadership of Councilman Curtis Jones, he's taken the lead in addressing the issue of bail reform. So I'm going to ask for the Office of Criminal Justice Reform to please come back up to the table. And the question is revolving around a 30% bail fee that's posted by defendants who are assumed innocent until proven guilty. And a 30% fee provided by Local Court Rule 528, which states that the court is empowered by general court regulation to designate a minimum sum of 30% of deposited bail, which shall be retained by the court. And so we know most individuals who can't make cash bail are individuals who come from poverty. And so my goal is to eliminate that 30% rule for those who are innocent, meaning they will receive 100% of their bail back based upon the court saying they basically win their court case, and their court case says they're innocent. And so I just want to get some feedback from you, Julie, as well as Michael and the MDO team regarding, is this fee discretionary, or are we obligated to take this fee from individuals who post bail?
My understanding is It's a local court rule, so it is a decision of the First Judicial District, but we have not yet had the opportunity to thoroughly review the rule at this time, and are happy to get back to you on that.
Point of information, Mr. Chair.
Just to follow up on that issue, there was a letter that myself and Councilman Jones sent to President Judge Sheila Wood Skipper about that issue. She sent a letter back. It was very short and basically deferred to Judge Neifeld in reference to that issue regarding bail and also the magistrates. So I can share that with Councilman Johnson, and we'll be following up with him. We'll be asking questions about that issue prior to their testimony.
Thank you, Councilman Green. And so what I'm going to ask for the MDO's team to officially request that you look into it. Two, want to see if you'll be supportive of eliminating that 30% cash bail rule for those who are innocent, right? And my recent conversation with Judge Sheila Wood Skipper, now she mentioned that it falls under the Department of Revenue. She said, I don't have anything to do with this, Councilman. So I'll follow up with you, Councilman Green, but this was as recent as my conversation with her yesterday. So she's saying it's not the court, she's saying it's the city, and she actually said the city came up with the rule. And so we're trying to get some clarity on.
So my understanding, and we'll go back and clarify this, but it is a local court rule that was signed by the administrative judge at the time. However, around the same time that they modified that, the Department of Revenue did take over collection of the fee. And it goes back to the general fund like most locally generated non-tax revenue does. But we are happy to confer with our partners at the courts and with you on this issue further.
Okay, thank you. And I want to go to a whole different area now in terms of quality of life. So I need some clarity, and this is more so for Michael DeBardinas, because I know your expertise in this particular field, being the former head of Parks and Recreation. So alleyway cleanups, right?
I'm sorry?
Alleyway cleanups, the cleaning of alleyways. What is the city's policy regarding the cleaning of alleyways? And two, are we able to change that policy to allow city workers, right, to make the cleaning of alleyways a part of our overall strategy and agenda for the city of Philadelphia? And doing some research, I looked at how in the District of Columbia in Washington, D.C., they had a program on Saturdays where they have certain designated areas where they're going to do alleyway cleanups. And so on my Living Point Breeze, I talked to neighbors who have chairs in the alleyways. They talk about how the alleyways are a public safety hazard, but most importantly, because we're having so much development taking place, we have disrespectful contractors who put all types of debris inside these alleyways. There is no real enforcement to hold these guys accountable. And the people who have to live with that are the individuals who are 9 times out of 10, not only just long-term residents, even new residents are being taken advantage of by contractors who are coming and saying, listen, we're not going to go to the city dump, we'll dump this debris in the alleyways. And I don't hope this doesn't, I hope this doesn't happen, but I don't want us to get to a predicament where there's some type of fatality in one of these alleyways, or a person can't get out of their home because the alleyways are filled up. And then we're all sitting back saying, we should have been more proactive.
So I'll have a quick answer.
The city's policy on cleaning alleyways, and then two, what is our plan to address this issue?
I think it's private property, so therefore it creates a problem for us to go on private property and clean. It's number one. Now I'll let Tommy.
Just on the private property piece, then somebody come up with a rule in city council and say you can't park your motorcycle on your own property in front of your home, which is private property?
I don't know.
You don't know?
I'm sorry.
No one knows?
But I think we're, with our zero waste and litter, I mean, short dumping, and I think that's what you're talking about. I believe, and I think the task force believes, that it is one of the single biggest issues around quality of life and litter in neighborhoods. So it's up like number one. You guys have helped us already with some advancing some stricter legislation relative, and Councilman Green helped with that. But I think we have to do more around short dumping. We have a litter index now, so we can know whether we're hitting the mark or not, but we have to do more. We have to figure out what do we need, what are our strategies, what legal means do we need, what neighborhood means do we need, how do we use city resources to address the question. We've made progress this year, but we still have a long way to go with the question. I think I'll defer to Tommy around the alleyways and what sort of are our obstacles or possibilities around that.
Thomas Conway, Deputy Managing Director. The alleyways are private property, and what happens is we will work with the residents through our community services program, and we've done this with your staff tremendously in your district. And then we put the carrot out there, basically if they work with us to clean the alleyway, then we'll take the trees down that are blocking the alleyway. And I think 2 years ago we removed about 153 trees, and then last year we removed about 40 trees, or this year so far. So working with the residents, I mean we make it a partnership that they have to work with us, and the majority of people are, and sadly it's a lot of times it's the senior citizens that are go-getters that are out there with us, helping to clean it up and all that. But right now, that's how we do the alley cleanups.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilwoman Reynolds Brown.
Thank you. I'd like to move back to the topic of pay equity. In the budget materials, there is a request for $711,000 for Class 100 for FY19. Can you please speak to how you intend to use those dollars?
I'm sorry, Councilman, would you mind repeating the question?
How you doing?
I'm all right. How are you?
Welcome back.
Thank you.
The question is around pay equity. So let me provide background, which drives me to that question. On page 7 of the testimony, it states that there are 348 full-time staffers in the MDO's office. Of those 348 full-time staffers, 200 of the minority staffers make $10,000 less than their white counterparts. Of the 304 exempt staffers, 167 of which are minority staffers, they make on an average of $8,000 less than their white counterparts. So given those harsh realities, and knowing that the administration has made some progress around the issue of inclusion, which is one issue, now we're dealing with the issue of pay equity, which is another hurdle. And so we know that with exempt employees, there's far more greater flexibility where leaders of departments have the opportunity to honor the mayor's mandate. So help me understand, given those realities, what will the $711,000 request be used for?
Councilwoman, thank you for the question. If I can provide a little clarity and context around the numbers.
That works.
Historically, the workforce in CLIP and 311, which combined are a sizable portion of the Managing Director's Office workforce, tend to skew these numbers down somewhat.
Tend to do what?
Skew those numbers downward somewhat.
Okay.
It's important to know that most, if not all of the workforce at CLIP is considered exempt, and most of the workforce at 311 is civil service. So we have been putting a big focus on pay equity at really a micro level in the department, and really trying to make sure that positions that are doing similar job duties are being treated equally.
Okay, and let me just add my name to the chorus for Tim Conway. If we could have that kind of work ethic across government, then we'd be in a mighty great place. He is amazing. He really is a great example of a great city employee. That's my personal 2 cents. All right, so thank you for the explanation with regards to CLIP. You said that 411 is civil service. And
311,
that's what
yes.
skews, 311 is civil service, and
But-
that's what skews those numbers down.
Both combined skew those numbers down somewhat. I'd also like to direct your attention to page 17 of the testimony, where we have some additional employee data. And whenever you look at just the full-time staff, we actually, the average salary for females, for females total at the bottom is actually slightly higher than that of males, and a similar dynamic is driving that discrepancy.
Okay. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Of course.
Let's go now to everyone's favorite topic called rebuild. Ready? So you provided the list, which we requested, and we thank you for that. We were told that the number was 1,100, but it ends up being 99 for reasons I'm sure are explainable. What I'm curious to know is of this, thank you, Council Lady, the breakdown of this list, which was also requested, and it may exist, we just need to see it. The breakdown of this list from those who are in professional services, separate from supplies, separate from those companies who are doing equipment, and those companies doing public works. So this is helpful, but it's not complete in terms of a picture of where and what percentage these companies represent across the rebuild picture.
Thank you very much for the question. Nicole Westerman, Executive Director of Rebuild. So the information that we provided to you was the list of businesses that responded to 2 surveys. The first survey to businesses that are in the OEO registry, and the second list was businesses who either are not in the registry or did not respond to the first survey. So the 2 lists, we are happy to go through those and sort them by professional services, construction, and supplies, and we'll get that information to you as soon as we can.
Yes, that's helpful for any and all that we do, because for too long, as a member of this body, we discovered that those MBEs and WBEs that were in the professional services space weren't being used for anything. And so we'd like some assurance that there's been some progress towards using and capturing MBE and WBEs who show up with credentials in that professional space. So that would be very, very helpful. And then lastly, since, I think the bell rang, didn't it?
Yep. Yes.
Since district council members are going to have a lot of say in what happens in their district, I'm sure they will want to know, of these, how many come from their councilmatic district.
Okay.
Okay?
We will work on that.
All right, then, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. By the way, Tom Conway has the unofficial lead in shout-outs in the history of City Council, I think. So, Councilwoman Sanchez.
I have to do mines now too, right? Right? Yes, the entire team, and I want to thank Tom, and I know Joanna Otero Cruz is also here, and you know the work that they've done around Gurney Street has been tremendous, and it's a challenge, and the guys manage to keep smiling even when we're cleaning up the dirtiest of the dirtiest things. So I appreciate all of your hard work. I want to go back. This is, we're not going to talk about it now, but I kind of want to put it on the radar. I really do appreciate the administration's willingness to work with us around special events, particularly in the district. You guys know how much that meant to me in the last administration. And I appreciate the fact that there's value to those community events that we do. I think that's hugely important. I do want, and I asked Catherine this last year, and we're going to talk about it this year when we get to the Department of Rec. I think we need to figure out how to better capture the utilization of departmental staff as it relates to bigger special education, special events. And the reason is there is an understanding in council that we have increased the Department of Rec's budget every single year. And when she does special events and people get pulled, though I understand she gets reimbursed, we don't backfill those hours, right? And I just want to get to a place where, as we build up their maintenance team and their capital, you know, leading up to all this Eagle stuff, nothing got done for 2 or 3 weeks, right? Because everybody was pulled. And so I just want to be a little bit more transparent about it. I think this is more, again, we should do more special events. So it's not about that, but it's like, how do we capture that cost so that when we're pulling people from the different departments, people see that?
Sure, and thank you, Councilwoman. We actually are working on that exact issue. We've created a working group that's made up of Office of Special Events, the Office of Emergency Management, Dave Wilson, our Deputy Managing Director, to really look at those costs and begin to think of a new way on how we allocate dollars, right? And be able to hold ourselves accountable for those events that we may not recoup all of our costs.
And then capture value, right?
Absolutely,
because
yes,
every
sir.
special
Yes, ma'am.
event brings a value. I just want to be clear that when we move the staffing around, right? I've become used to it. But I think it's more transparent. I think people then value it more, right?
And we've done an analysis of what each department is spending on special events. I think one of the things you will hear from every department that testifies, some of their overtime is being driven by these special events.
And we should highlight that. And
Yes.
people should know about that.
Absolutely.
Because again, I don't want to do less. So this is not about doing less. I want to talk a little bit about the workforce piece and just bring something to your attention because it's something that I spent a lot of time working with Cheryl Logan at the school district around the Comcast agreement that we had and the agreement to do 100 internships a year. We've struggled with that and we've only gotten 17. And so now that we have this workforce initiative, you know, I don't know if that's the place we park it, but you know, Cheryl Logan's leaving the district. I told Bob Merkin when he was going to Comcast, I was going to put it on his plate over there, right? But I'd like to figure that out because when we did that around CTE programming, I really looked at that as an opportunity to do the connectivity between CTE kids and those opportunities. So I want to put that as, you know, because you're doing some of the seasonal workers to permanent workers, I really look at that as also a vehicle. So
It makes a lot of sense. We're thinking about the same things in the same way, and how do we sort of connect to CTE? How do we connect to make the summer experience a year-round experience?
But they agreed to it, and they've only given us 17, and it's been a challenge.
So,
Some of it was there were some CTE changes at the school district, but you know, in January of my senior year, I was working and getting paid, right? And I was working at Cigna through a work program. You know, the school district stopped that work program. And through this, we were trying to get the school district to move in that direction, back to that direction, because most of my friends ended up getting hired in permanent jobs, you know, who decided not to go to college. And so we're missing an opportunity because we wrote it into their franchise agreement, and we've not held them to it.
We'll be happy to stay in touch with you around this.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you,
Mr. Chair.
Councilwoman. Councilman Green.
I've been here.
Huh?
I've been here.
What's that?
I said I've been here.
You've been here. Okay, all right. Yeah, all right.
Oh, Andre left. Andre told me. So real quick, just to follow up on, then we addressed the other issues regarding the bridge performance, and I think Councilman Sanchez asked a question about performance management. Just one last follow-up question regarding anti-violence initiatives. So considering some of the stuff we've been talking about, is there any thought about putting in the budget and some type of line item regarding anti-violence initiatives separate and apart than the dollars we've talked about for Councilman Johnson that were discussed, or any of the other anti-violence dollars that we're already spending? And giving perspective, I just ran down here from the Cultural Fund. You know, the Cultural Fund, you know, provides dollars to grassroots cultural organizations, and so some of the conversation we've been having is about grassroots anti-violence organizations, and it made me think about a similar type of concept.
Some of the funding we are requesting is for specific funding for grassroots anti-violence programs.
That's part of the 61 and the 13?
I know that is part of the actual budget request that
This year.
Oh, this year. Oh, I don't have the budget details, so see it.
There's a $300,000 request. Portion of that is specifically geared towards micro grants for community organizations.
A portion of the 300,000, not for any mayor's office initiatives, but for actual grassroots
A
organizations.
portion of it, yes.
Right. Do you have an idea of what amount that portion is?
It's roughly 50,000.
$50,000. Okay. And that's, so of the 300,000, we feel $50,000 is sufficient for grassroots organizations?
I feel like additional funding would always be helpful, but there are priorities throughout the budget.
Stop. Additional funding will always be helpful. We can stop right there. Okay. Thank you much.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Reynolds Brown?
Yes, I was just sharing with my staff here. I don't believe I ever got the answer to the question about the use of the $711,000. If I missed it, forgive me. But what those dollars are going to be used for? The
I'm sorry,
class $100?
Councilwoman, where are you getting that number from? Is it from the difference between what our FY18 current target is and the FY19 estimate?
Yeah.
Okay. So it may be helpful to provide this in writing because to clarify the fact that some pieces, while that is the net difference, some pieces of our budget are moving elsewhere, namely the managing director, or to the mayor's office.
Okay.
And we also have some pieces moving in as part of the creation of the Office of Workforce Development that presently exist elsewhere in the department.
Very well.
There are also several new asks that we're requesting that are related to the municipal ID program, some funding for the MacArthur grant match, and a position in the Office of Criminal Justice. But I think it'd be clearer if we can provide that in writing to the chair.
Okay, that would be appreciated. The other incomplete question I failed to get on the record was my understanding and confirmed with staff is that the capital project, the budget for the capital programs in the Offices of Sustainability is being zeroed out. Is that accurate? Are we interpreting that correctly or no?
I don't believe that's accurate. I think there is money, carry forward funds, carry forward appropriations authority from prior years that have not been spent yet.
Okay.
That should still exist in the capital program budget.
Okay. And the Art Museum to date has been the biggest beneficiary of the dollars from the Office of Sustainability capital programs. Is that accurate? No.
Good afternoon, Councilman. The Art Museum Energy Efficiency Project is actually being funded by a bond that the city is floating separately, since it's about an $11 million project. We didn't have the capital for that.
And with the carryover dollars from this year to next year, are there any new dollars for the Office of Sustainability in that category?
There's no new dollars, no.
Okay. All right. I thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Councilwoman. Councilwoman Blackwell.
Thank you very much. I remember years ago, we had the WHIP program as well as the CLIP program. Those are the real good days. But let me ask you, I know you said a little bit about alleys and backyards. And we really have an issue with not only abandoned properties, but also properties, especially where you have seniors residing and they can't deal with those big trees and such in the back of their properties and in the alleys. What can we do?
I think, get Tommy to back up here. But again, I think we run into the private property issue, Councilwoman. So, but if it's a street tree, we have responsibility for the street trees. So, and that's run through Park and Rec. And they have, I think, 6 crews. But on private property, I don't think we're able to go on private property and remove or trim trees for homeowners or for apartments or other properties.
We can't come up with some kind of problem. We used to do stuff like that, where people could even try to make an agreement or try to do a lien. You all remember the old days. But
That's where we're very rich.
Councilwoman? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I think 2 years ago, City Council put additional fund in the Eclipse budget specifically for alleyway trees. So that's how we created that program around that. Now, that was just, I think, $200,000 the first year, which was 2 years ago, $100,000 last year was earmarked for that. And that's how we were able to, work with the neighbors and clean up the alleyways and then have the trees removed. A lot of times, the problem is there's no access to have the tree removed. I think.
So you want us to put some more money in it and designate it specifically for that? Sounds okay.
You brought it up, Tom, so.
That sounds good to me. Doesn't it sound good to you, Councilman?
I would never argue with you, Councilwoman.
All righty, and we're happy to, in our back rooms, have that conversation.
And we can say Tom Conway suggested it, I think.
That's right. Sounds great. I will not take it further. I like that. Thank you.
All right, thank you all. There being no further questions, this committee will stand in recess until Tuesday, April 3rd, 2018 at 10 a.m., at which time we will convene right here in room 400 City Hall. Thank you all very much.